One of the most common things that we're getting asked these days are electrolytes. Are electrolytes something that we need? Where do I get them? What's going on? Is this one safe? Is that one good? Welcome to Truth or Trend, where Dr. Vrzal and myself take a little time to share with you what we see through our keyhole, right? Our perspective of life, but that perspective is compounded by the great benefit we have of getting to see how this actually affects people in real life and our clinical experience. We dig deep into the research. We look at the different things. We ask all these questions. And we're not here to take sides. We're here to ask better questions and kind of help all of us make better choices overall. Really appreciate all of you listening and asking questions. Last week's episode was specifically because someone was taking Dr. Vrzal's Headache Symposium course. And she said, I've gone through the whole course, but I still want to hear him talk about it on Truth or Trend. So the whole episode on bi-temple headaches. And today we're going to do a shortened version, a short and sweet one on electrolytes. Because we got a lot to say about them for sure.
We do.
Personally, I think when I mentioned this to you, Dr. V, the first thing you said, hey, what about that thing about element? Because a lot of people are taking LMNT, right, as their electrolytes, and there's a huge lawsuit against them saying that they weren't actually claiming or putting on the label the maltodextrin. And this is what's crazy is so many people take these because they're fasting. They want to fast, and it's very important that you don't go too low in electrolytes when you go into a fast. And it was breaking the fast because there's so much maltodextrin in it. It was hidden under the hidden ingredients. Now, again, I'm not taking sides. I'm just talking about what sparked this conversation. And there are influence out there, health influencers, very influential. I'm not going to name names, who are selling these online. And we want to give you some other options. And I want to share with everybody what I do, why I have them at all in my clinic, and Dr. V, I'd like to hear from you too. So what are your opening thoughts on this for everybody?
Yeah, well, first off, I wore my Iron Man shirt in honor of today's presentation.
That's right. Bring it on. Let's see it.
Some bikes and runners and stuff on the shirt here.
Yeah, excellent. Which I'm going to have to start doing now.
Yes.
Biking. I've started my biking, so I'm going to catch you.
Yeah.
You watch out. It's coming. It's coming.
Let's go.
Yeah.
That means I'm going to have to start bringing my bike when I come to Texas, huh?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's going to be a different game. A little bit more humidity down here than Southern California that you're used to.
All right.
Your little bubble out there. And I think our air pollution is worse than yours too. So you're really not going to be able to keep up. That's actually, let me ask everybody who's watching, any interest in us talking about hyperbaric chambers? Because I think that is something I hear a lot of questions about, and we may be including at the retreat center that we're building out in Mineral Wells because of the air quality here. Just going to throw that out there. Totally different episode.
Yeah. And I was listening to a cancer book over the weekend that talked a lot about that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about electrolytes.
Yes.
Get in there. Definitely a subject that being a lifetime athlete, especially in the aerobic space.
So are you sharing your screen here? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah. Aren't you seeing it?
I am, because I want to share my screen in a little bit too, but let's share what you got ready for everybody.
Okay.
Right here. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been dabbling in this whole electrolyte space for literally decades, trying to find the best options and so on, and healthy options, because most of them, I mean, back in the early days, Gatorade was one of the first ones to talk about the use of carbohydrates, or like you talked about, maltodextrin is one of the most popular ones, with sodium to help accelerate the uptake of sodium into the cells. And so certainly we sweat. I mean, on big sweat rides, my cycling kit will have white all over it. I'm
going to ask you to hold that thought real quick, because I think I just heard Dr. Crippen come in. I'm going to invite him to come back here in the studio in case he has some contributions to this conversation. Because
all right, let's go.
What you were saying was really important. Dr. Crippen, is that you? Be back there to stay with us while we're talking through this. We are recording, so this is another way to prove to everybody that this is not AI generated. There is no edit that happen. We just record and we talk about it. And we say hello here. Yeah, actually, I don't
We
sit. We usually
download.
stand. So I'm going to bring it up.
What's up?
Hey, Doc. Good to
In
see
about,
you.
about a month or two, I'm going to fly to California. I'm going to show up in your office during the podcast.
There you
Like
go.
And then we'll photo bomb it from the other side of this thing.
You better bring your bike.
Awesome.
He's gonna challenge you to a race while you're out there.
Let's go.
And lose horribly.
So he's
So, Doc,
sharing
we
his slide
figured
right now.
you'd have some input on. We're talking about electrolytes today, and so I was talking about over the almost 3 decades now that at least that I've been playing with these, and talking about the fact that my cycling kits are actually white with the minerals I lose during a big sweat ride, and so. Turns out as we're exercising, most of the products are going to be in the 800 or 600 to 1,000 typically milligrams of sodium, and I'm typically shooting for 600 to 1,000 milligrams per hour as I'm training, and typically about half during exercise. It's different during exercise versus non-sweat time. So during exercise, it's about 600 to 1,000, and then half of that in potassium is in general, and then certainly magnesium for muscle contraction and so on. Magnesium more so even afterwards. But these are the typical makeups that we're looking at for electrolyte products as we're, again, during activity. And where this came about, and we'll talk about that in a sec, but I was trying to find healthy options. I was super excited when Standard Process finally came out with a whole food nutrition electrolyte, and they have that possible product. I didn't notice the label quite properly. I didn't quite read the whole thing, so I took the pre-workout electrolyte and then went for a bike ride, and it was my high intensity day, so it's a course, a route that I use that I can really test and tell how effective something's working. So I used a pre-workout electrolyte and went for my high intensity ride and sucked wind. I was just not getting it done. And that product is developed more in this sort of mentality where it's almost a 1-to-1 or sometimes even more potassium that we would have during non-active time. So I was trying to use that to do high intensity intervals, and it didn't work so well. Then I read the top line there that says pre-workout. It's like, I was very disenchanted because I thought the product didn't work right, but I didn't use it for what it was supposed to be used for. So I put the pre-workout electrolyte in my water bottle, like during work or during non-training time, and then the workout one in during. So we'll talk about that. But cortisol certainly affects our electrolytes, and high cortisol affects aldosterone, so sodium potassium balance, and puts stress on the kidneys and that sort of stuff. So we want to replace these. This is part of why bananas are popular during your events, your marathons, and things that people consume. So again, high sodium during activity, which one of the electrolytes we're about to element is one. Sorry to throw somebody under the bus. It has 1,000 milligrams, and they're billing it as a daily. One of the podcasters, very well-known podcaster, talks about using it first thing in the morning, whereas really we want to use something more in this sort of frontier for our normal electrolyte replacement.
I'm going to jump in real quick and talk about
Please.
one of the reasons that I want people to think about this is the potassium piece to me. Potassium is something that's so missing in so many ways, and it's not just bananas. I would say when I ran my first LA marathon, what I ate was a half of an avocado before I ran, about an hour before I started, with some salt on it, just to get a little bit of those electrolytes and that potassium in there as well. And I'm just always trying to find ways to make sure people are getting more potassium because they're so hyper fixated on reducing sodium, but not talking about bringing potassium up. And I think that we have gravitated in a diet that's gotten less and less and less. And one last thing I just want to say to give context to that, commercial farmers have to put 3 nutrients back in the soil or they can't even grow their crops. It's NPK, right? Potassium has to be put back in the soil. We talk so much about magnesium, but potassium is just like this huge one that one of the reasons I keep any electrolytes at all is just to get some level of potassium in people. If I can't get them to eat foods, if they're in a keto diet specifically, or if they're eating foods that are high in carbs that are depleting all the potassium in their life. So I'm trying to find other ways to get in there. But please carry on, sir. You're on
Well,
something.
you need to translate what NPK is.
Nitrogen, phosphorus, and K is potassium.
Potassium. Yeah.
Exactly. So
Thank you.
thanks for the translation. Exactly. So,
Dr. Jeff, do you have anything to add in that rant?
Preach on, preacher. No, I think it's great. But what Dustin said made me think about what we actually talked about at the cardiovascular seminar. And one of the things I brought up is the issue with blood pressure, too much sodium, or is it not enough potassium? Right. And the power of looking at, when you start looking at whole foods and or sea salt versus sodium chloride, table salt, right? This is some of the conversation that you're getting at here. And I haven't looked at specific on the hourly needs with exercise and without. This is great. And I love it. But that's what it comes up for me is what we talked about with, is it too much sodium that's causing the high blood pressure, or is it actually a lack of potassium that's causing the high blood pressure? And, we looked at a couple of studies with sea salt not causing elevated blood pressure, but table salt do. And that's hitting, as Dustin just said, and what you're hitting at here, which I think is really valuable to bring out.
And the adrenals, you're talking about cortisol. The adrenals need potassium too. It's one of their preferred minerals, right? So that's a big one.
And that's the pump, right? We're familiar with adrenal fatigue triggering salt cravings, right? And basically that's holding on. Adrenals optimally working holds on to sodium and kind of dumps potassium. So you need a plethora of potassium. You need an abundance of potassium to be able to do that. And so anyway, it's the key mineral, the key exchanger is the sodium potassium exchanger that I think aldosterone's working on in the kidney. So anyway, those two were designed to be gotten together, right, through our diet and through what we're eating.
Well, that's what you're pointing out, that the whole food version from the standard process line that's called possible line is higher in potassium. Is that correct? You're saying it's very potassium.
For the pre-workout one is higher in potassium. Yeah. Okay. And they use whole food sources, which is our green leafies that are so unfortunately deficient in our diets in most of the standard American diet. So we've got sources, as you mentioned, bananas, we've got broccoli, all these other, and table salt. Dr. Jeff was a great point of, when they use Celtic sea salt or something like that, that's a full mineral balance of a supplement, whereas table salt is sodium and chloride, and with iodine, iodized, right? Table salt, which is garbage, is going to create other deficiencies, unfortunately. Whereas when we do the whole food, more, sea-based, and unfortunately, sea salt is a nomenclature that's out there, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee. So look at the color of the salt that they're using. Are there other minerals in there, or is it just sodium and chloride where it's going to be white in nature? And I've used some of those even as trying to make my own electrolyte back in the day, and creating these. So back to the exercise aspect, we want about 600 at least. Milligrams of sodium per hour. So that's typically one bottle per hour when I'm out, on the 4, 5, 6, 8 hour bike rides. So that's kind of the process.
4, 5, 6, 8 hour bike ride.
Maybe not. It depends on the speed.
Yeah,
it depends on the speed. Could I bike for 4 to 8 hours? Yes. How far would we go? That's another question. And how much electrolytes would I need to keep up with them? They don't make a strong enough one. That's probably the answer. I do have a bike though, so I've got
nice. That's all right. And so sweat loss, it affects performance. And for me, my sign that I'm starting to get deficient in electrolytes is I start getting complacent, and I'm undriven to compete when somebody goes by me or some of that sort of stuff. And it's like, I'm starting to dig a hole. And fortunately, if I catch it fast enough, I pound, a full bottle, if you will, and get caught back up. And then it's not okay if somebody passes me. So that's kind of my mental, emotional way I keep an eye on things during a race, at least, because I do tend to like the endurance races. That's kind of my niche, or where I tend to compete.
So look at this slide, man. You really nailed it here. You got to put your glasses on, though. You got to put your readers on to be able to see this one, everybody.
Unless you have good minerals in you.
Yeah, right.
So we pulled element out, and again, it's 1,000 mils of sodium. So I just try to pull out some of the most popular ones. Certainly Gatorade, sorry, it's not our favorite.
Sucrose and dextrose, we should just put a big black line through that one right there.
Right.
sure.
Yeah. And so again, a lot of these, when they're designed for during activity, the original premise was the sodium, the glucose helps accelerate the uptake of the sodium into the cell. That was the whole premise of electrolyte drinks. There's been a lot of research behind it. And it's both sides. It's truth and trend,
Yeah.
ultimately. I have a buddy that was one of the athletes in one of these studies, and their kind of final conclusion was they couldn't demonstrate obvious progress having the electrolytes during activity. Again, I just kind of confess that I definitely see a difference, but as far as the metrics that this guy's study that he participated in, they didn't see enough progress. Again, I do feel a definite tangible benefit, and I for sure do a lot of electrolytes during my rides, especially in Southern California in the summer. So most of these are, 1,000 milligrams. Some of the Noon is a fairly clean one. They don't have as much sugar and so on in them typically. Some of them I do use caffeine on interval days with some of the electrolytes. Re-Lyte, I have some patients that use this and seem to feel fairly good on it. It's a moderately clean product. And then we even got rates, huh? Look
Nice.
at the one that you started out.
Right, was the
Throwing
number one US, but unfortunately we
number
were
one
showing
there?
the lawsuit where the maltodextrin was hidden under the other ingredients in that one. So there's been a big pushback on that one specifically.
Yeah, and it's just, it's the LMNT just to me is too synthetic and too isolated, right? And that's kind of what you guys are getting at there, where it's just here's the 4 to 6 things you need, as opposed to more of a whole food or a sea salt based one, which at least the Redmond's Re-Lyte has a sea salt base in there and some coconut water, which is kind of nice just to see some foods sprinkled in there.
And trace minerals. So it does get a 92 excellent on there. So yeah, that's a good call like that.
Right. And a lot of them use maltodextrin again for the glucose to bring the salt across the cell wall. And maltodextrin is a little slower releasing sugar, but maltodextrin is extracted from corn for the most part. And so, on our last podcast, we were talking about corn causing ovarian cysts and some of the consequences of that. That's a massive struggle I have because I try to avoid it, but almost every electrolyte has, and one of the ones I'm going to show you, I think on the next slide, has maltodextrin, but it seems to be okay. So anyway, lots of research can be done as we dig into some of these are some of the more athletic oriented ones. Scratch is a very popular one. Vitargo is very popular. Vitargo is one that I've used a fair amount of, and some of these have these high calorie ones, like this Tailwind is one I've been using a fair amount lately on my bigger rides because it's got 350 calories. So I can get about half of the calories that I need per hour by simply drinking my electrolyte. So I find some good value in that for the bigger rides. When it's 2 hours or less, it's not quite as critical. But when we're going up beyond 2 hours, is really critical to make sure we don't get too far behind in our calorie consumption because that's the bonk. Right, so Vitargo makes a calorie one, high calorie option. Sorry, TMI maybe, but I got the runs trying their product. It tells me they kind of fed yeast, and my body was trying to get rid of it. And there's your maltodextrin again. They have very many options along those lines.
So the Tailwind, hold on, it says 0 grams of sugar. So where are the carbs coming from for that? But it does say dextrose, fructose in there, but it's still 0 grams. Is that just a misprint?
How does that work? 0 grams of sugar, but then it's
right.
3 different types of sugar.
Yeah,
that might have been a typo through this.
Okay. Just making sure. I thought there was some magic that they used. They waved.
Yeah, I think. Well, here it is. Here it is from the label.
Oh, okay, good.
Carbs, max absorption. There's your sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium.
Okay, so there's 25 grams of sugar in there. Okay, got it.
Yeah, there it is. So dextrose, sucrose, organic. So maybe that's the difference. They're calling it out specifically as organic maltodextrin. So we've got again, it's a nice option. I like the ginger. Lee Carroll, when he was with Standard Process, turned me on to the fact that ginger tends to, because of its gastric issues, tends to actually stimulate function, if you will. And so they have a lemon, and then but the ginger has some benefits athletically beyond. So I tend to use this one more. And again, there's that 360 calories that we get. I think we covered all of this chart. Again, that's just some of the typical electrolytes that athletes are going to be considering. Let's look at now the better choices. So we've got the possible whole food electrolyte that has whole food electrolytes in there. Sodium, there's your 600 milligrams, and then about half matched with potassium.
Good.
So again, it's coming from organic apple pectin, apple powder, organic Airplex red. What is that? Red starch powder, barley.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
Atriplex or the mountain spinach, which is in that SP.
Oh yeah. There we go.
Yeah.
Red food.
So that's and just to jump in on that, one of my favorite things about that is if we look at the chromium content, right? 429% of the chromium we need. So just like it's kind of like getting SP red food in an electrolyte, right? So this is the one I do on the days I have kind of tough workouts and I really need to replenish. And I love the whole food chromium source, right? And Atriplex being one of the top minerals or one of the top plants that bind sodium, which is why they use it in this product. But that chromium, so you're getting an SP red food type dose through this electrolyte. So you're kind of getting a little bit of the best of both, or some benefits of both as you do that one.
So you muscle testers out there, when you're seeing blood sugar issues, you may want to keep one of these on your shelf and test them against this. It's always nice to give somebody a powder instead of a pill. Sometimes that makes it a lot easier.
Right. Yeah. And chromium is going to resensitize insulin receptors when we're doing these high sugar products. So during exercise and for the first half hour, especially post-exercise, insulin receptors are the most receptive. So if you're going to splurge or you're going to do carbs, that's part of why I'm a sugar-free guy, but I use it during activity in this sense because we utilize it much better during that time. So good call, Doctor, on the chromium and how valuable that is to go along with all of this. So
also
lots of great ingredients.
Molybdenum down there, molybdenum, and we've said it 8 different ways. But that's another way to get it in
there, right? And which helps facilitate sulfation, which is the liver pathway to help heal the tissues, right, after we exercise. So yeah, great mineral there. And then the pre-workout when we're preparing, it's Dr. Jeff's probably going to want to talk about the beets in there and the cardiovascular benefits of all of that. We've got great, camu and beets and fermented beets and as well. So fantastic product here. Mushroom powder. We got Dustin wants to talk about that. I was kind of interested in the fact that they put the caffeine, they put the green tea in the pre-workout one instead of the during workout one. Because sometimes, you think that it's during the activity that you want the green tea and the little kick and boost and motivation. They use monk fruit, which is kind of the current sweetener that seems so far. I don't know. Do you guys have any other insight on that? I seem to be okay. It seems to test pretty well.
To be, one of the best ones that I think when people need something to sweeten it for sure. Yeah. I'm not gonna claim that this actually makes these taste good though yet. I don't know to actually say that.
It's so funny. I was talking to Jack Dubois about that whole food electrolyte and just kind of saying my experience is it tastes like salty beet water, right? It's kind of like my experience. And he said, yeah, this is definitely a product that's flavored for health, not for taste. So I always do that with patients. This one's flavored for health. It's not your pina colada electrolyte. It's a chocolate electrolyte. This one is flavored for health and also the iodine, the molybdenum, or the molybdenum, however we're calling that, the chromium. But there's so many other good things in it that, like, who doesn't need generally a little more whole food based iodine or chromium in their diet? I think that's a wonderful thing for a lot of people. So anyway, flavored for health is how I explain it to patients, and I think that for good
that
reason.
works.
Yeah,
nice. Yeah, flavor for health. And then so maybe it'll taste better we can work with them to create a high calorie version
Yeah.
for my long rides. And for the long rides you guys are going to do when you come visit California.
Start training now.
Yeah, so electrolytes matter because hydration and fluid balance add muscle function and endurance, which is what part of what we're about to cover. Supports nerve transmission, healthy adrenals, which should be in this list as well. So a big deal. And then let's talk about, if we do too much of the wrong sodium, it's going to affect the kidney meridian. There's a nerve, this is supposed to be on the second intercostal space, or second metatarsal head here. That neuroma point is typically a high sodium point. And so it should be right there. Oops, sorry. What did I just do? There we go. So right at that second metatarsal head is the kidney point. The muscle that gets weak when the kidney's compromised is the psoas muscle. So that's kidney related. And so that deep hip flexor, when you sit for a long time and then you stand up, that psoas tends to pull and it's going to give you that deep hip pain. These are signs that your mineral your minerals might be out of balance. And then we've got the postural orthostatic tachycardia and so on.
So you're saying if you're taking the wrong electrolyte powder, you might start to notice some of these symptoms specifically.
Right. Yes. And so leading up to, again, neuroma type pain. And so this is often strong kidneys, strong you. There's Dustin's line. The kidney meridian governs your
and I just happen to eat
balance.
all the kidney loving foods every day. I eat all of those. So yeah.
Look at you go. And bone broth. I drank my bone broth this morning. That's probably good. That'd be a good episode in and of itself.
Sure.
So kidney meridian affects the psoas. So deep hip pain, psoas attaches to all 5 low back vertebra in 3 different areas of each vertebra. So it's a massive low back stabilizer. When not functioning well, we end up with sciatica because the kidney meridian parallels the sciatic nerve. And so these are signs that the kidneys are struggling. And so we want to look at our mineral imbalance potentially to solve some of that.
One thing, can I have you talk on that? Can I have you talk about the connection between that and neuropathy, especially on the foot? Because I've heard you talk about that before. And I've started using that with patients and had some really good results looking at that kidney meridian and kind of neuropathy. So I'd love you to talk about, that connection, because I think that could be really valuable for the listeners who may be dealing with it or patients dealing with it, because neuropathy is something, hey, here's some gabapentin, take a high enough dose until you poison yourself and your hands start shaking, right? And there's not a lot of good answers. And I've had patients, one I'm thinking specifically spent 5 or 7 years with this issue and did 30 treatments with this guy and, of certain techniques on the stuff, but it was a kidney issue that underlied it. And it was really helpful for him and some of the patients I worked with. So I'd love to hear just kind of your thoughts on that connection as well.
So for me, as crazy as it is, when somebody says neuropathy, it's still about where. And I find more benefit, more value treating the associated acupuncture meridian. So in this case, we talk about neuropathy and more specifically, the neuroma pain. That neuroma pain, so my camera's taking the neuroma pain under the second met head is a tonification point for the kidney. So that becomes very active, kind of like on previous podcasts, we talked about the lateral epicondylitis is a tonification point for the hormones that gets active when hormones are out of balance. Same mechanism when the kidney's struggling. I think it's kidney 2 point under the second met head gets very active. And so balancing it is the correction. When we have pain down the sciatic pain down the back of the leg, and somebody calls it neuroma, then if it's neuroma then we're looking at, is it on the plantar surface? If it's on the top of the foot, then that's tends to be stomach or gallbladder. So it's about the location and tracing it back to the meridian that tends to affect that area is kind of where I would go.
I think a big gun that you could also always include in that conversation is heavy metals and their effect on the kidneys. And
absolutely.
Is look for some heavy metals.
Time people back into, was that 3 podcasts ago when we talked about heavy metals and their effect, the arsenic especially, and its effect on the kidney. So that's a definite trigger that goes into this whole equation.
You had that the gentleman who came to our seminar in January, and he's had horrible neuropathy, and it was aluminum. Remember, you went for thymus PMG with him. That is as well. So yeah. always rule those out, I think.
Always. And because so kidneys, and mercury isn't, I mean, again, that was that toxic metal podcast, but mercury is very stressful on the kidney, as is arsenic. Cadmiums affect the bones, potentially the kidney. So smoking, we're getting on a bit of a rabbit trail, as is so easy to do, because healthcare is so fun. So keep the kidneys working well, so that you don't have sciatic pain, don't have neuromas. Postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. So this is the vessels, affecting the vagus nerve ultimately, because the vagus is getting abnormal feedback from the imbalances. This is typically a sign that we want to consider bumping up healthy, good forms of salt, like the Celtic sea salt, Himalayan sea salt. Both of them have been tagged, blown cover, if you will, for toxic metals. Some of the Celtic sea salt I see shows lead, some doesn't. Himalayan as well. Unfortunately, we have to test it, but those are still far better than table salt, sodium chloride. So we've got our electrolytes. Bone broth is a good source of minerals that also help bring tone and integrity to the intestinal lining. So we get double benefit that way to do that. So getting our good, healthy minerals, electrolyte balance will help keep the blood in our head when we stand up, and reduce some of this POTS and what's the other?
I think we've got that on our weekly webinar. People asking us about POTS quite a bit. So it's really, really important to bring this to their attention. All the minerals and adrenals for sure.
Yeah, that was the last week. You had that question. Somebody said, "Hey, what do I do?" And you shared anyway. That's when you start talking about your adrenal kind of quick test and some of the things there. But that connection's great.
Yeah, and so adrenal glandulars are the other thing we want to consider here, right? Because the adrenals, adrenal corticotrophic hormone helps keep the vessel tone when we stand up, so that we don't pass out. Lots of mechanisms in there, but supporting oxygen, iron to support oxygen transfer. So much in here, but just kind of wanted to help people know what to look for, what some of the signs are, again, to look at what the potential triggers so that we don't end up with these other dire consequences. Poor sleep can be compromised by deficiency of these healthy beneficial minerals. So support blood volume, right? So if blood pressure is too low as a whole, then electrolyte sodium in particular, bringing the water volume back to blood to help bring the blood pressure into a healthy range. People say, "Oh, you're an athlete, your blood pressure is super low," but is it pathologically low, or is it heart rate? Sure, heart rate's going to go low when the heart's functioning more efficiently, but too low blood pressure is typically a sign of adrenal fatigue as well. Right. That is a problem and has its own long-term consequences.
I had a practitioner ask me about that because her blood pressure is insanely low. And so, we're working on her adrenals, but now I'm thinking we need to add in, make sure we're getting all the minerals as well. For that
right.
reason.
And high blood pressure gets a lot of talk, right? As 90%, 95% or more of the talk about blood pressure is always too high, too high, too high. One of the slides we showed at the January event was actually blood pressure below 130 and below 120 is more deadly than blood pressure of between 160 and 180 for patients who are in their 70s and in their 80s, which is roughly the exact opposite of what we've been told. And not to say that high blood pressure is a goal or what we're going for, because it's absolutely not, but we got to understand what's the risk with high blood pressure, and it's a blood vessel pop. So we got to know what nutrients we need to support the vascular system and minimize that risk there. But also, I think what's underappreciated is 50% of the time, between 40 and 50% of the time, when someone breaks a bone in their 70s, they're dead within 12 months, right? So that lightheadedness, that low blood pressure, that getting up quickly, that feeling unstable, right? That's why balance and lower body strength is so important as we age, which gets into a protein conversation. But this idea of high blood pressure is an issue. Yes, it absolutely is. But statistically, at least according to a couple of studies we looked at, it was actually low blood pressure is actually more deadly for someone's in their 70s and 80s.
I've saved or shared the slide that you made on that with maybe a dozen people last week.
Yeah,
because it was 400,000 people they looked at. Yeah, and I'm seeing people in their 80s getting put on lisinopril. I'm seeing when their blood pressure is like 130 over 80, they're still putting them on blood pressure medication. So this is a
Yeah.
message that needs to be repeated. I was going to actually make a whole video and talk about this because it's so important.
Same thing. I had a patient just get out of the hospital, and they were on a beta blocker to slow down the heart. They had some arrhythmia, which may have been from the antibiotic they put them on in the hospital. That's a whole nother conversation. But anyway, on 2 or 3 different things to slow down the heart. It's like, I feel tired and fatigued. I said, okay, what are you on? Well, they're on 5 medications and 3 of them were slowing down the heart. And their blood pressure was something like 80 to 90, or no, 90 to 100 over 50 to 70.
Oh, yeah.
And I just call your cardiologist quick, because no wonder you're tired and exhausted. You're lightheaded when you stand up, you go through this. But it was a classic case that's a person that, unfortunately, they're off them now. They call their cardiologist and they're doing better. But like, that person's a time bomb, at least in my mind, to fall, to, have a concussion, to break a bone when you're in your 80s. And then all of a sudden, like, statistically, you lose your mind at that age, or you break a bone, and like, that gets ugly quick.
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, taking us back.
But they're also told to stay off of salt.
Yeah.
Right. It's something that they kind of need in this case. No, this is a really good. We do need to get deeper into this conversation another time. We'll have to have you back on as a guest to go deeper, because I'm seeing it too often, way too often, not being talked about nearly enough. So, but let's finish.
Sure. The conversation, the reason the press is, low blood pressure is long, slow death, where high blood pressure is stroke or heart attack, die today, so that's where the conversation directs and kind of can get carried away. Right. So fuel it. Here's some of the foods, Dustin talked about avocados in there. It's a great source of potassium and good, omegas for a long endurance run, like a marathon, right? Sodiums are good foods for that. Let's see, celery I put celery in all my smoothies that I'm blending up after this podcast. So I make smoothies that have, again, sodium is always, sodium from celery is one of my typical solutions. And as I mentioned, I drink bone broth on a daily basis as well. Interestingly, on the bone broth front, we'll probably end up doing a podcast on that, but had a patient that I thought was doing peptides because her skin had transformed and looked 5-10 years younger. And all she had done was added bone broth to her daily routine. And she looked profoundly younger. It was pretty radical. So it improves blood pressure, sodium, stabilizes blood pressure, and the dizziness, the POTS, and so on. Then we've got the potassium, often deficient in the diet. So we want to get these foods in. Zinc has gotten a lot of press. So we want a whole mineral source of an electrolyte. But we're talking about electrolytes, which is mostly sodium, potassium, and magnesium. And then calcium fits in there as well because it helps stabilize and for muscle contractions and so on. So iodized salt is not your best source of iodine, just to clear that up. They realize that people that live away from the coast, live away from the ocean, tended to be deficient in iodine. So they decided to add iodine back into salt. It's kind of like the whole, bread concept. They realized they processed all the B vitamins out of bread and people got sick. So they spray synthetic forms back in. Same mentality with the iodine or iodized salt.
This might be a good point to mention, though, also. A lot of people using like reverse osmosis water systems and like drinking distilled water, that they're going to be much more at risk of creating deficiencies in these, because the body you can't even put electrical charge through that water because there's no minerals in it for it to even go through. So it's another big one that I get concerned about. A lot of people doing overly processed, they're overly filtering their water, taking all the minerals out. You got to make sure those come in.
Yeah, so then when they drink that reverse osmosis minerally void water, then it steals minerals from the body to metabolize it. So I did it. I had a RO system because that was the clean, healthy water for 10 years. And then I realized I get dehydrated every time I drank my water at home, but I drink Arrowhead a couple ounces or, some other more traditional spring water. Not that that's the best, but something that still had the minerals in it, and my chapped lips would go away, all my signs of electrolyte deficiency. Even in the kinesiology circles, there's seems like 10 years ago at least half of the body of kinesiologists were like, drink RO water and take minerals with it. So ultimately, that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, I'll share with you. I always drink mineral water, and I was going to share that that's my source of electrolytes. Is one of my main sources.
Yeah, your crazy water is a good source, that
Yeah,
sort
man.
of stuff.
It's always
Yeah.
right here. It's always right
So
here.
the challenge is, RO is one of the only ways to get the fluoride out of the municipal waters, though. So then we've got that hurdle to overcome, and we want to remineralize that water before we drink it. There's a prelude into one of the upcoming podcasts.
Yeah.
So minerals matter. They regulate blood pressure and hydration. Cortisol balance, again, because aldosterone is an adrenal hormone as well that regulates sodium potassium balance. We've got the nerve and muscle function, and the balance the mind, and blood sugar and energy. So many things they just go on, and they're connected to this. And so many people, unfortunately, are doing wrong sources of sodium that create these balances, these problems. So actually, I did keep that fairly short.
Yay! Unfortunately,
So-
we are almost out of time here. I've got a few things we need to get
There
to.
we go. So John was a patient of mine that had neuroma pain whenever he hiked, and it was basically when he would slip and get more carried away with processed foods, salt and sodium type foods. He'd have that neuroma pain. Had several of those that had problems using synthetic salt over taking like an organically bound minerals or a product that's going to have, or these possible electrolyte drinks that have the appropriate, sodium as it's found in nature with the other minerals associated with it.
Mm-hmm.
So there we go. Use your electrolytes to stabilize your blood pressure. Low blood pressure is not great. High blood pressure is not great. be the healthy, baby porridge person.
Not too hot, not too cold.
That's
right.
All right.
If you stop sharing, I just want to share two last things here for everybody, just to show them what I was going to share with you. And that is to look at the electrolytes like you just mentioned, in the mineral water specifically. And this is the one. I mean, you're looking at, you got calcium, magnesium, potassium, you've got sulfate, zinc, silica, lithium. When you're getting it from a really good source, you're actually getting a decent amount of those. And sometimes just getting people on that water is all the difference that I need. And Dr. V, we're going to talk also a little bit about this one, right? Because we have many people adding in creatine, but this one has a creatine and electrolyte piece, which is kind of interesting. That maybe we'll get
I do like that one
later. Yeah, this is another one that we've kind of shared with a lot of people, but we can get deeper into that next time. In the interest of time, last thoughts for everybody, since we pulled you in as a special guest and you didn't even know it today.
Nothing more special than a surprise guest, especially when it's a surprise to the guest.
Yes.
This is awesome. The highlight of my day, the highlight of my last hour is this. So anyway, it was awesome. Love learning. Thank you, Dr. V, for sharing that. I loved in that slide deck, and thanks, Dustin, for the invitation to be here today. So I'm loving it.
Dr. V, last thoughts before we cut it off?
Take your electrolytes, make good choices. Don't do table salt.
There you go. Thanks for listening. And make sure you leave comments and questions below, and we'll make sure we get to those. And we'll keep these episodes coming. Thanks for watching.